It's all about the Rovers Trust tonight. Let's say we've got three cracking guests with us in the studios tonight, and the co-chairman are with us, Wayne Wild. Good evening, Wayne.
Good evening, Gary.
Oz Jones also. Good evening, Oz. How are you?
Hi, Gary.
And Stephen Halstead, you may have heard up early this morning on our Graham Livers breakfast show. Now, Stephen, few shares, not a lot, is it? But you've basically flogged them off pretty cheap to the trust. Is that a fair assessment?
That's a reasonable summary.
We'll get down to facts and figures and why. Firstly, though, I'm going to ask the co-chairman, Wayne Wild and Oz Jones. Now, why was the trust actually formed? Just remind us why you formed this and felt it was needed.
The process began about 18 months ago, really, when we could see that there were problems with the administration of the current owners, and a couple of organisations set off in different directions. There was the Blackburn Rovers Supporters Investment Trust that I was helping heading, and there was the Blackburn Rovers Supporters Trust that Oz was heading. We both had the same aims, slightly different ambitions, but ultimately it was for the good of the club going forward. It made common sense to combine our efforts together, and we formed the Rovers Trust, which launched officially at the Blackburn Cathedral in November of last year. So it feels like it's 5 years, but it's only 5 months. But,
Oz, let me ask you, I mean, once you got together and decided, right, OK, amalgamate, here we go, what were your main goals when you sat down together as an organisation? What were your main goals at the start?
Well, initially, we one of the driving reasons we wanted to get together and make sure there was a platform for supporters to have a voice in the forward running of the club. The goals were many and varied, and we have a mission statement and so on. But what in the back of my mind, speaking personally for a moment, is I wanted to see the club get back to a situation where, if the professionals involved at the club weren't making the right decisions, then let us have a go. We wanted to have a say in the running of the club. And then from there downwards, you can see, the branches on a tree, there are lots of other aspects that we want to get involved with and have a say in some certain levels of decision making. So we want to have some control back at the club, because clearly it is now out of control. OK, so as an organisation formed around about 18 months ago, what do you feel as an organisation you've achieved so far, Wayne?
Well, the membership has continued to grow. Currently we have over 1,100 paid memberships. That might not sound a lot in comparison to season ticket sales, for instance, but if you consider the Arsenal Trust has been going for 10 years and we've surpassed their membership numbers, we're continuing to grow every day. The followers on the social media are growing dramatically, and we're getting a lot of headline news, and only last week we had an article published in the New York Times. So we've had some fantastic coverage, whether it be Sky TV, BBC, and throughout the world. So we're getting our name out there.
Popped up on my phone. I'm a subscriber to the New York Times, believe it or not. It does wake me up at silly o'clock, but there you go. Any productive dialogue during this time then? I know there was issues early on when things were going on at the club, previous problems. But what about productive dialogue? And is that a way forward for you with the owners and with people at the club?
That's been the biggest disappointment, to be honest. We've tried every sort of angle to get close to the owners, but I think they're so now deeply entrenched in themselves and defensive, they're struggling to talk to anybody. I really feel that they struggle whichever direction they've gone in. They've found that people seem to have took advantage of it. And there's only us who really want to help for no benefit of our own, for no financial benefit.
Well, they've gone in every possible direction, but the right one.
Yeah,
I know. At one point, I suppose as a businessman and offering your services and a passionate fan, I think you were a bit put aside that the just ignoring your pleas. I mean, I think you did get a bit vociferous at one point about non-contact or not even replying to your emails or letters.
The very beginning, it was extremely frustrating because I wrote a detailed letter on behalf of being a main stand sponsor and a lifelong fan, and after the weeks go by and you don't get any reply to it, considering if I did that with my customers, we could bust within weeks. And it got very frustrating. After a while, you realise that there's culture difference or people differences, and you calm down a little bit from that and then try to do it in a more structured manner, which we've tried to do. We've had a little bit of a breakthrough recently where we know that Madame Desai has been thoroughly shown of what we're about. She's asked for more detail, and we've prepared a very detailed presentation that's about to be handed to her at any point.
Well, that's very positive, isn't it?
Yeah, do we expect to get a direct phone call? Probably not. But
she's not going to knock on your door next week, is she?
No, there's been offers for us to go out there. Jack Straw was putting a contingent together for myself and him and a couple of other guys to go across, and that's been the frustration point. That at any point we'd have gone, we'd have put our case across, and it's just been difficult. But we keep going.
Oz, what about productive dialogue, if any, with people? Well, in brackets, in charge of the club here, Manager Director Derek Shaw, Operations Director Paul Agnew.
Well, we've had conversations with Derek. Our corporate officer is quite close to Derek, and he's been our main conduit into the club at the moment. Well, our only real conduit, and Derek has provided the channel, as it were, to allow us to give the Venke family, or the Venkes, I should say, the message that we want to help. We produced a letter, which a lot of our members, or all our members, will have seen, explaining who we are, what we want to do, and how we can help them. And it was portrayed in a 100% positive way, which Derek has forwarded to Mrs. Desai, as when just alluded to. She's come back and said, tell us more, and that's where we currently stand with it. That's our one and mainly and only channel that we've had so far.
What do you hope to get out of that in the long term? I know it's hard to put it into a few sentences, but
what's our alternative? Mrs. Desai runs the club effectively. We have no alternatives. We need to keep going back to her and asking and asking and asking. And if we don't get an answer, we come back and ask again. And until the situation changes, until we get some sort of positive feedback, we can only do that. In the meantime, in the background, we are growing and we're preparing for a time when maybe they decide that they've had enough, or maybe they decide they want to do something with us. We're preparing all the groundwork that will allow us to be legally and professionally able to do what we say we're going to be able to do. And by expanding our membership and spreading the word amongst all the supporters, that's exactly what we're doing.
OK, more from Oz and from Wayne Wild, and we'll hear from Stephen Halstead coming up next.
Travel you can trust.
From BBC Radio Lancashire.
I'm John Burgess with the latest on the roads. Still busy in Lancaster, I'm afraid, particularly on Parliament Street, heading north for Greyhound Bridge Road. The one-way system also pretty congested, but it is now easing off. In Cleveland's West Drive, still closed in both directions because of that earlier serious accident between Roswell Road and North Drive. We have had word it will reopen again at around 6:30. Until then, you can use that cut through from Roswell Road down to Amandanis Way. Speaking of Amandanis Way, it's looking pretty slow in Polton at the River Wire roundabout between Breck Road and Skipple Road, and good news in Blackburn. Those traffic lights are now working again on Barbara Castle Way. They did actually go out at the Preston New Road junction and caused a few problems earlier on. We think it was because of a power outage. If you spot any other problems, call in if it's safe and legal on 0330 123 0181.
Travel you can trust.
Check out the motorway cameras
at bbc.co.uk/Lancashire.
Gordon Burns.
I'm hosting a 3-hour quiz featuring music, memory tests, mental agility, sport, mystery voices and comedy. All those sorts of questions that you can't easily find the answers to on the internet. And guess what we're calling it? The Christie Factor, because it's raising money for the Christie Hospital. The Christie Factor is on Thursday, May the 16th and will be live on BBC Radio Lancashire from 7 in the evening.
Call the BBC Radio Lancashire Help Desk 0345 305 9000.
The Christie Factor.
BBC Radio Lancashire
with Gary Hickson.
If you want to join us tonight, you're welcome as always. 81333 on the text. Any thoughts, any contributions, or what you're hearing tonight from the chaps in the studio, from the Rovers Trust. We've got co-chairman Wayne Wild and Oz Jones with us. And I mentioned Stephen Halstead, who this week, well, you tell us the story, Stephen. A few of your family shares that you've got in the club and now belong to the Rovers Trust. What made you do that and why?
Well, I was approached by the Trust late last year to transfer some shares. I thought about it. I sat on my hands for a bit. I entered into some dialogue with Dan Grabko, and after the home defeat by Peterborough, which I thought we'd plumbed the depths there, I decided to actually make a move and give some shares, transfer some shares as a nominal
Couple of
value,
quid, yeah.
accurate, to the trust, so that they would have an official voice within the club. It's no skin off my nose. I've retained some shares. My son's quite happy with the thing, that from a family point of view, we've still got some shares, but the trust have got some shares.
Let's be honest, it's not the value in any way.
There's no value
it's the
at all.
access it gives elsewhere, isn't it?
Well,
Just
yeah.
explain what the trust can now do.
Well, the trust will now have the opportunity to go to the AGM and to raise questions at the AGM. Now, unfortunately, that might not lead to very much, because the local board doesn't seem to be particularly effective, but the main thing is it gives them a voice.
And we can see the accounts in full.
Well, I was just going to say, Oz and Wayne, what does this offer you now that you can actually study the accounts thoroughly?
Well, on the publicly listed accounts, there are certain things that you just can't get the answers to, and it gives us the direct capabilities now to write to the finance director, whoever that might be at the time, and ask some real detailed questions of which they are obliged to reply to. I think what it's also shown is a big positive to our current member base, that they see that we're constantly making steps forward, and it gives them a share of a share as well. So everybody who was a member of the trust is now a small member of a shareholder of Blackburn Rovers as well.
It's interesting, just coming outside the trust kind of question and why it's there and everything else. Stephen, as a fan, as a lifelong fan, and obviously a very frustrated fan to be doing this for your shares and being involved in a share basis as well, obviously shows your loyalty to your club. How frustrated have you got then to come to this stage where you think you need to do this?
Well, the frustration is that the only thing you can see was happening was that the club was going down financially and playing wise. I started at the start of this season saying that avoiding relegation would be an achievement, and everybody else is talking about playoffs, and I thought, well, no, not with that squad. And then the situation with the constant change of managers, it just all got too much. So that's why I did what I've done, and I hope that the trust can get some traction from it, to get some other shareholders to do the same, to give them a voice in the club.
I mean, it's obviously you're well in gear with what's going on in the trust, and you obviously support what they're doing. There were other organisations, then there are other organisations that have got together. Where do you stand with all this, Stephen? I mean, how does it go forward? What happens to your club? How is it going to be helped by any of these organisations, do you think?
Well, you've just got to hope that the owners are prepared to enter into dialogue with the supporters' organisations, and to the extent that the trust is a properly accredited supporters' organisation, then you hope that can lead the way. To the extent that there are other fan groups outside, then fine, let them piggyback on it. But this is an organisation with paid members.
We are the only officially recognised supporters trust, and there can only be one per football club in this country. Supporters Direct is a government-backed body which is designed and set up to promote and advise supporters trust. We are the only one that is out there. We have the official backing, and what happens is if you get somebody who takes over a club, there are two examples I can give you straight away. Jack Walker took control of Blackburn Rovers, and we all know what he did for the club and the reasons why he did it. And secondly, you can be the more common version, which is prevalent these days, which is an offshore or foreign ownership investor type, and I use the word advisedly, investor, but a foreign company coming into what was, in Rovers' case, originally a Premiership club, wanting to use that to further their own aims. And the big difference is your benefactor type is putting his money in because he wants the club to be successful. And yes, Venkis might want the club to be successful, but not for the same reasons we do. So when and if, and it's a when, that the current ownership decide enough is enough, they want to sell, we've got to make sure that we are able at that point to throw our hat into the ring, whether it be 100%, 50%, 20% with anybody else who's interested in taking the club off the Venkis' hands, and therefore having a say at board level, at decision-making level, and to exercise some control. So we can get back to a situation where, even just within 5 or 6 years ago, we had a fantastically well-run club. We're talking about Blackburn here, a town of 100,000, 110,000 people, punching well above our weight, finishing 5th or 6th in the league, get into semi-finals of FA Cups, get into the finals and winning the League Cup, and regularly a top 10 team. And that's because we were well run and we were organised and we all pulled in the same direction. We all wanted the same thing. And when the Venkies decide that they've had enough, we want to be the first in the queue to say, right, we'll take it off your hands and we'll get back to that situation where we were very recently in the grand scheme of things.
Okay, let's bring a bit of financial analysis into some of this. Not saying you just aren't good with figures. Far better than me, mate. I'm skinned. Let's have a word with Dan Grabko. He's your finance expert, joining us from his home in Sweden, actually, tonight. Good evening, Dan. How are you?
Hey, good evening, Gary.
Hi, Dan.
All the lads can hear you. Dan, just very briefly, we've been talking about the shares that Stephen's passed on that now allows scrutiny of the accounts and etc. Where do Blackburn Rovers stand at the moment? Is that a big question?
That's a big question. I mean, obviously, we can only speculate as to what this year is going to be. There's talk about £2 to £3 million losses per month, and that doesn't seem to be too far off actually. When we take a look, and we've done our own forecasting and analysis of the accounts ourselves, and last year we had £8.5 million loss for player trading. This year it could be anywhere from 30 to 40 million pounds before player trading. So it's not happy reading.
And has that taken into account the £4.5 million compensation for sacked managers? Not taking into account any backroom staff, of course, who may have had payoffs.
Exactly. Yes, that's all been part of our calculations. We've had to make sure that we've gone through all the various exits at board level, at manager level, and everything else.
I've got to ask you, as an someone who knows what they're doing with figures and accounts, is that compensation issue really, is it like me just digging a big hole somewhere in my business and going, here, I'll just throw £4.5 million down it?
Well,
because it's of no use. It's of no use, is it?
That's almost like a rhetorical question, because obviously it's just a big money pit. I mean, why? Who wants to do that? I mean, it's money directly off your bottom line, of course.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but then you come down to what you guys are here for in the first place. It's the management of the club, what's going on behind the scenes. Financially, how do you see it, Dan? Seriously, what's gone on, how things have been brought into the club, some players, managers, contracts, all that comes into it, without going into the court case. We'll have a chat about that in a second. But, you have to question the management structure, don't you?
Well, yeah. I mean, you go from a board that's highly respected. John Williams, Tom Finn, and Mr. Goodman as well. They were all proven and very respected inside the game. And you go from that, and then you go through. I think we've gone through it. This is our third board of directors, active board of directors anyway. Third managing director. So it just seems like a revolving door, and then. Nothing seems to be within their power in any case. I mean, if we go into the court case now, I mean, we all have heard and seen the material from the court case, but it's just demonstrative of the lack of any management, of any real management structure at the club at all.
Well, I mean, you mentioned that. I mean, the last few days, all of you are fans of Blackburn, otherwise you wouldn't be doing this, but the last few days, seriously, I've seen no let-up at all, sadly, to calamitous state of affairs seemingly behind the scenes at the club, as more embarrassing situations seem to come out over these 2 years. Henning Berg, compensation court case. Once you digested that information, Wayne Wild, how did you feel about the whole saga?
Well, Dan has gone into the numbers quite a bit, and that is one of the key worries that we have going forward, whether we are financially stable and the owners will continue to underpin them losses. But the good name of Blackburn Rovers has been dragged through the mud worldwide. From a fantastic name that we had, the laughing stock is not even the right words anymore, because I think people have stopped laughing at us now. Because
I've read two.
It's not funny anymore.
I've read two broadsheet accounts of that court case, and fabulous writing. That's not what I'm saying. Written almost as a pantomime. not written as a report on a case. It was written in a pantomime state. I mean, you're right. It's frightening.
Well, I'm glad to see the national media have started to wake up, because we've been shouting from the rooftops for 12 months now. And the people just didn't want to get involved. All they seen were the protests going on and didn't look behind the scenes of why. And we were vilified in lots of areas of the media. I've been publicly stating how the guys on Soccer Saturday, they were abusing the club and the fans dramatically. And
well, they're telling you shouldn't have been treating your manager like this, you shouldn't be saying this, you shouldn't be doing demonstrations. That's what was coming out, wasn't it?
It's all gone a little bit quiet from these guys on Soccer Saturday. They don't mention us anymore now. And, it were ridiculous, the comments that were coming out. We all put complaints into, and we never got an answer back. So the name of Blackburn Rovers has been dragged through the mud, and to have it in the New York Times on a Saturday edition just shows you how poor that we've got.
Interesting. Oz, what did you make of the court case and what came out of it, more importantly?
Well, I'll tell you what comes out of it. It shows that the club is not being run at all. It is chaos at the club. The right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. In fact, I don't think even there is a left hand. There's just a right hand just waving in the dark, making ad hoc, random decisions which are costing the club millions and millions of pounds. Absolute bonkers. I've never, ever seen anything like it in all my life. I go back to when I first started Rovers in 1980-81, just when Bob Saxon started. We were fairly rubbish for a bit, but we couldn't afford a player, so we didn't buy a player. We couldn't afford the milk. We didn't buy milk.
There's the old days, though, isn't it?
Well, it is the old days, but I think it's Mr. Micawber's adage of wages 1 shilling and 6pence in, expenditure 1 shilling and 2 6pences out equals misery. ... You know what I'm saying? It doesn't matter what scale you're on, as long as you're organised enough to pay the bills. Then going forward, you should be successful.
I agree with what you're saying there, but also I've quoted already tonight about the previous regime. Yes, respected men in their field, but I think we never should move the fact that those people also sought out the new owners. I'm sorry, but they did. And the other side of that is, who's accountable? If John Williams was still here now and this was going on, not that he would, but if he was, he'd be accountable, wouldn't he? But who knows who's accountable at the moment?
Well, there isn't anybody. The book stops.
It's a big question, though, isn't it? I mean, people have got titles, but who's accountable?
The accountants have got the accountability lays firmly out the door of the owners. They can take any advice from wherever in the world, whether it be that respected agents, whether it's previous football managers or people at the club, but ultimately the owners make the final decision of who they appoint. So unfortunately, and it's a difficult position for us to be in to say that, because we're actively looking for dialogue, hence why they're continually making the same mistakes over and over again. I remember 18 months sat in this studio saying we need an experienced manager. Since then we've had 4 inexperienced managers, and it just seems the same mistakes are being made time and time.
Let me ask, I keep pointing to Stephen as a fan. You're all fans, but you know what I mean by this. You're here on behalf of the Trust. Stephen, let me ask you, no one, as far as I know yet, has officially commented on behalf of the club. None of the men we're talking about in charge at Ewood Park or not have even had the decency to explain anything to the fans yet, albeit verbally or in a newspaper or indeed on their website, or even answer phone calls, emails or text on the matter at all. Where does this leave the people supposedly in charge at your club?
Well, it leaves the fans frustrated, doesn't it? I think I'll just echo the points that these two guys have made. Until Venkis took over, we apparently, we were a very well-run club, and we were respected in football as being a very well-run club. You could tell by turning up to the AGM that John Williams knew precisely, virtually to the penny, what was going on with that football club. So, from a non-football point of view, one of your first decisions to get rid of him was crass. So whether, you've got...
It's not looking like the best one now, is it?
So, if I could just make a point, I've been fortunate to go to 3 or 4 of the end of season player awards, and John Williams would do a 10 or 15 minute presentation with video footage of the season, and I can honestly say it made the hairs stand on the back of your neck, the passion that he instilled in the club and the pride that you had watching it and seeing it.
True
Fabulous.
Absolutely right.
Now we're at a point they don't even have the end of season awards, so that is how far we've fallen. I know it's only a small piece, but it shows
you have to have a sense of humour in this, don't you? Otherwise you go mad.
I've lost mine. Many moons ago.
I really do mean that. I mean, I've spoken to so many people about it. Are you now literally, funny one, this, awaiting the outcome of all this from India, an announcement, or not? Or you're not expecting an announcement?
Well, I think come the end of the season, there's a natural time for reflection, and maybe they will take that time to do that. I've given up second guessing what's sensible and the logical thing to do. So you never know. But come the end of the season, we've got Birmingham away on the weekend. That's the end of the season. There should be some time to reflect and to actually, well, I'm not building my hopes up, but to try and make some sort of sense out of the mess that we've got left here in May 2013.
Well, we've got Dan on the line from Sweden. Dan, financially, and I don't expect facts and figures here, but if you look at what's gone on at the club and some of the players and the signings and everything else and how they're looking, especially to fork out millions to managers who've been sacked, £4.5 million on compensation. You've got large pay packets at the club on the books. Signings like Danny Murphy, still got a year to go. Paul Robinson, a year to go. Dixon Aturu, another 3 years on a big contract. Justin Rhodes, in your favour, on another 4 years. Jordan Rhodes. Jive, Scott Dan. How can that club now sustain that kind of wages all the way through? More to the point, have they got the finances, or will they use finances to add to that wage bill to build a side capable of challenging for promotion next season?
Well, I think you got almost all the players. I think you missed Leon Best there as well.
Okay. And Leon Best.
The other those are the big wage players, obviously, and that reflects in that loss that I told you about earlier, anywhere from 30 to 40 million. That's mostly wages, of course.
Because if we go back 2 years, this is the end game. This is what coming out of the Premier League. We'll be back in one season. We'll be back. That was the end game for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. We were hearing about player contract clauses, players not playing because for financial reasons and whatever else. And then in the summer, it's sort of contradictory, because in the summer we sign aging players on long contracts on super high wages, and in the end we haven't, we've probably lowered our wages maybe a good £5-10 million, but we're still, probably anywhere from 30 to 35 million in just first team wages, and that's more than our entire projected turnover for the year. So that's where you're getting the huge losses from automatically.
Those wages wouldn't be so bad if there were players of the calibre of Michel Salgado or Jason Roberts or Brett Emerton or any of the other half a dozen experienced top quality pros that we've just released on the grounds of, we need to bring the wage bill down, only to replace them with duffers on the same amount.
Statement.
Over to you, Gary.
Well, thanks for that. Just dropped me off a cliff, why don't you?
Well, it is. All you're doing is you're moving the...
Well, I take your point as a fan, and I can't judge those players on the basis you have. But
you don't have to look at the league table, really.
I take your point, yeah. I think the league table tells a story, whether what's going on or not. Let me briefly, because, we can't talk about everything tonight, but I think it's fair at this point, and while we've got Dan on as well, and we've mentioned John Williams, the previous regime, how the Venkis and the Rao family were, right and proper people to take over in the Premier League. But are you happy as fans, and indeed the Rovers Trust now, that the authorities here, it seems to be passing the buck all the time? There's obviously irregularities somewhere along the line that's not been right behind the scenes, as in they may not have done contracts. I have no idea what they are, but it's almost public knowledge that there is a sort of investigation going on at the FA. Not that you'd know from the FA, because there's only one thing you get from them when you officially approach them as a media organisation and ask questions, and that's all you get is no comment. So they won't actually confirm publicly that there is investigation, but most people would tell you now that from investigations going on behind the media that the FA's head of integrity, David Newton, is apparently looking at certain situations surrounding the takeover in 2010, the control of the club, and the involvement of agents and advisors. Now, fine, but why is it the Premier League can say, yeah, fit and proper, not a problem, and once people are in, it seems there's no quality control, there's nothing that can go wrong? Do you know what I mean? There's not been anything since.
The directors have got to take some responsibility. They're not fit and proper to run Blackburn Rovers, in my opinion. And Mr. Bevan from the League Managers Association said, in the light of the court case yesterday, that it's unacceptable that a club should be run in that way. OK, Mr. Bevan, if it's unacceptable, what are you intending to do about it? He's all talk.
Well, he's asked, though, hasn't he? He's asked, are the FA going to invest it? Are the Football League? And
that goes back to your book passing again.
Well, as journalists, I can tell you exactly where the book passing goes. You ask one organisation, they say refer to the other. You ask the other, they said they refer to the other. So you get nowhere with it.
this goes all the way up to the very top, whether it's FIFA, whether it's UEFA, whether it's FA, whether it's the Premier League. The problem is you've got highly paid individuals running these organisations, so it's in everybody's interest to keep it all sweet and calm. The problem is there is no independent policing of this, of anybody who really wants to delve in the detail. Most of the people involved at that level don't really want it to come out.
I think it's fair to say that the Football League are scared of litigation as well, because they will not approach someone who's already been passed fit and proper by the Premier League and then question that in their Football League. It's just, as fans, it must absolutely frustrate.
That's why we're here, Gary. We've got to be in a position where we've got to be able to say enough is enough, even if it's just getting the supporters of Blackburn Rovers organised. Enough is enough. There's got to be an alternative.
Oz, when you look at the regulations, of the league's regulations, it states the clubs must include in every contract an undertaking on the part of the employee not to bring the club of the league into disrepute. Yet nowhere, it seems, that undertaking for a club to meet the same test, and that's why you're saying, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If you go back to Germany again, and I don't like to jump on the bandwagon of the Bundesliga. Everybody's because of the success of Dortmund and Bayern and the general outlook of the game over there, which is fantastic. But one of the things they do there is that they have to ask each club to present something along the lines of a financial.
Well, it's a projection.
Plan, a projection for the coming season for scrutiny, and if it's not up to scratch, you say no, come back. You can, and everything's acceptable.
The contingency plans to say to that team, no, you're not competing this year, and they bring another team. You're quite right. I mean,
can you imagine that happen to us?
No.
They'd laugh. They say, go away, come back. Wrong. Try again.
But it'll only get worse next year because the financial rewards are just growing massively. Yeah. So the Sky money goes up next year. The rewards get bigger, massive deal. It'll just get worse, and there isn't anybody. There's no independent body anywhere that's going to scrutinise.
So let's just have not a vote, but let's agree to agree that as far as you're concerned as an organisation, as far as you're concerned as fans, you're not going to get any help from the authorities on this.
I ain't banking on it. No. Not in the short term.
No.
And Dan, let me ask you this on a financial basis. And Oz just mentioned that there's obviously the 50+1 rule in Bundesliga about ownership. There's also, as Oz mentioned, that projection of financial projections you've got to give each year. I mean, is that feasible to do that in this country, do you think?
Well, I mean, I'm not British, first of all, but I think that, of course, every business does it anyway as part of their budgetary process. It's just a matter of handing over that material to an authority that will then look at it.
So historically, we're saying, by what you're saying already, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you're saying then that football is a totally different thing than any other business. It's a different...
Well, it shouldn't be. I mean...
No, but it is, isn't it? That's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Of course it is. I mean, there's it's the only billion-pound business, international, conglomerate business that isn't regulated by some kind of independent authority. I mean, it's supposed to be, but there's no follow through. There's no anything. There's just, the fit and proper test, for example, is a bare bones legal definition. Basically, if you haven't gotten any bankruptcies on your history, then you're fit and proper.
But the thing about that is they can pass that, and then they can be owners of the club, and then they'll pass the duty of running the club onto people who would not even get anywhere close to passing the fit.
Or do anything they want, it seems.
Yeah, that is a loophole, a massive loophole in that idea.
Dan, we're going to lose you here. Anything you'd like to contribute before we say goodbye?
No, I just want to thank our chairman for doing an excellent job, and I especially want to thank Stephen, Mr. Halstead, for giving or transferring his shares to us. It's been a huge boost for us.
Yeah. And just finally, obviously, I think you've had chance already, haven't you, to scrutinise what's going on, and it's not looking great, is it?
No, it's not. That's pretty much the one-liner you can give.
An understatement of the year, that one.
Yeah.
Dan, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
That's Dan Grapko, the financial expert with the Rovers Trust, joining us on his home from Sweden. Bleak picture, Stephen.
Yes.
On the financial front. And you've opened the door. No, seriously, as a fan, when you hear an expert on finance going through those figures independently like that, it paints a very, unless the Rao family decides to be very benevolent and say, here's 50 million for this and here's 60 million for that next season, it's not looking great.
Well, if you look at the squad that we've finished up with at the end of this season, there's absolutely no hope of a promotion push next season. So there's got to be some investment. And what's going to happen if somebody actually decides to take a punt and come in with a bid for Jordan Rhodes? Because we'd certainly
Which is on the cards, really.
Well, it must be, mustn't it? You know, somebody scoring that many goals. So there's got to be some investment.
Let me ask you this: the Rovers Trust tonight, Wayne Wild, Oz Jones. What would you advise? Not people just in the trust and who've joined you, but fans in general. What would you like to see fans doing this summer? Should they just do what fans usually do? Is that's going out, getting excited, buying season tickets, looking who's coming in for next season, and carry on as normal? Or should they be demanding a clear and strong statement of intent from the club first?
Well, these are quite obvious answers. There's nothing much to look forward to, Rovers fans out there. The future is pretty bleak, but the only thing I can say really is if you want to get involved and do something about it, you go to our website at roverstrust.co.uk. There's a sign-up form, £10 a year for adults. You can then have your tiniest part ownership of the club, and from that little acorn, then perhaps you can then have some sort of say in the future of the club.
I'll read part of Carl's text out. He texted earlier. He said, "Glad to see a professional group represented the fans, gents." He says, "My question is, if all attempts fail to get the Rao family and the Lankies on board, then would you seriously consider I can't really read the rest of that out. I think he's on about a British embassy in Pune and things like that, but I'm not sure that's the way forward, Carl, but I think he's going on my view there. You know, do you carry on as fans and it'll sort itself out, or do you become more radical in your objections?
We have to remain professional. That's the one thing we've tried to do throughout this. We're continuing to try and get dialogue with the owners, however frustrating that has been at times, and we are continuing with different ways through to them, and hopefully we'll have a breakthrough one day. But as well as that, we're also looking to other areas, and should they decide that one day they want to either let go of the club or sell it to somebody, we're in active discussions with people who are also looking to invest as investor groups, and we're having some very good ongoing discussions.
Is it fair to say, as an organisation, you do have a short-term worth there, but in the long term as well, it's a two-step affair at the moment, isn't it, this? Because in the short term, you're trying to get dialogue, you're trying to move things on. In the long term, you're saying, sat in waiting, something should happen, we're getting stronger. Yeah.
This was always looked at as a long-term plan, always from the very beginning. It will look to maintain a trust forever for the life of Blackburn Rovers. And we would hold yearly elections, and different officers would come and help run the trust. And we want to be there as a critique of the club going forward, whether we're in a good, healthy position or a weak position.
One of the things we haven't mentioned, and it's fair to do so, is that in the time that we've been running since last November, we have put a lot of groundwork into sort of social and charitable directives, and we've been in touch with quite a large number of local football clubs, junior football clubs, with a view to helping them with some sort of donation or charitable donation in going forward, in part of our larger remit, which is to support grassroots football in the local community, and that goes right from sort of under 7s, under 9s locally, right up to non-league and semi-professional clubs. Only 2 weeks ago, myself and a couple of lads from the trust went to watch Chorley. We sponsored the match ball there. We paid for the match ball out of our own pocket, and just I'm still in contact with the commercial director at Chorley, trying to make some sort of plan to go forward to be mutually beneficial. So that's worth mentioning as well as the bigger picture that we've been discussing.
Brilliant. Oz Jones. That's Oz Jones, the Rovers Trust co-chairman, along with Wayne Wild in the studio and Stephen Halstead. More to come. With you through until 7.